The Doily Man by Colby Newton. Looking back now, I can see there were times when I could have stopped what was happening. I could have just quit and found a new job. I could have listened to my wife. It could have gone differently, but it didn't. Now I just have to hope it doesn't happen again. If I had to pick a moment that was truly the beginning of the horror, it'd be the day I came home without a job for the third week. May was sitting at the kitchen table when I came through the door. The breeze rustled the loose wallpaper before folding the newspaper she had opened to the classifieds. She dropped her pen on the paper and looked up, pushing the hair from her face. "Any luck?" she asked. I didn't say anything, and she understood. "Well, there are a few new listings. You can try those tomorrow." "We keep saying tomorrow, but it never works out. We'll be kicked out of here before we make enough money to pay rent. I don't know what else to do," I said. I kicked off my shoes and dropped into the chair across from her. By the look on her face, I could tell she wasn't feeling well, probably from not eating all day. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I've been thinking about that," she said. "I think I know what we should do for now, just until we get everything sorted out. We can't wait for our first paycheck." When she pulled her hand away, her wedding ring was left sitting on my fingers. "No, we can't do that. If we sell it, we'll never be able to get it back." I tried handing it back to her, but she pushed it away. "I'd rather have a place to sleep and no jewelry than be wearing it out on the street. There's a pawn shop a few blocks down. You still have time to make it before it closes." She gave me an unconvincing smile, but I couldn't think of any reasonable alternative. This would be the first chance I missed to put our lives on a different path, to save us, but I didn't know it at the time. I left her sitting in the dark apartment and reached the pawn shop as the sun fell behind the skyscrapers. The inside was dank and smelled of cigarette smoke. A large, bald man leaned against the counter, watching a crackling television. As I approached him, he made no sign of noticing me. "I'm here to pawn something?" I said, after a moment. His body shifted toward me first, with his head reluctantly following. When he was finally able to pull his eyes away from the screen, they carefully evaluated me. "What is it?" he grumbled. I held up the ring and his eyes narrowed. He inspected me again before finally speaking. "Why sell what is clearly a wedding ring? Didn't turn out so good, huh?" He grinned, scratching his stomach. "Everything is fine. We just need some money." The man nodded slowly before seeming to finally make up his mind. Although I could never know it for certain, I hope he didn't know what he was about to offer, or what it would mean for me. I'm sure he simply meant to make a smart business decision, but I can't help feeling like he had a part. "If it is work you're looking for, I can help you out," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked, preparing for some attempt at cheating me out of my money. "I own a window washing business for the scrapers downtown. Nothing too big, just a couple guys out cleaning every day. One of them cut out on me last week and hasn't even bothered calling. I'm looking for someone to take his spot. Are you interested?" I thought about it for a moment, putting the pieces together in my head. "Why are you offering this to me?" "Because you have this nice ring to trade. You give me the ring, I'll give you the job. You'll make more money in the long run," he said. "That won't work. We can't wait for a paycheck. I just want cash for the ring. Tell you what, I'll throw in some kind of bonus after the first week to cover whatever bills you're worrying about, but only if you're working both shifts every day this week." I thought about May, about how hungry she had looked, and decided it was better to have a long-term source of money than a quick fix. "Okay," I said. I traded the ring for a piece of paper with an address and a time, and left the shop, trying to think of a way to explain this to my wife. At first she was angry and hurt because she thought I had been scammed. Once I was able to find the ad for the job in the newspaper, she let out a sigh. Shaking her head, she said, "I hope you know what you're doing." That night, we described our perfect meal to each other as we went to bed hungry. While lying there, I couldn't wait for that to end. Now, I'd give anything to go back to that time. The following morning, I arrived at the front of a skyscraper with large dumpsters lined up on the sidewalk. Sections of plastic were covering some of the windows, and there was a sign with a list of businesses announcing they were still open, despite the appearance. I saw wires hanging down the length of the building, and followed their descent to a hanging scaffold that was resting on the concrete. A man in overalls was loading materials onto the platform. I walked up to him and introduced myself, shaking his hand. "Joseph, nice to meet you. My name is Benjamin. So you're the poor guy who has to replace that jerk that ran off," he said, shaking his head. "Yeah, I guess so. It might not be so bad. It looks like the building doesn't have as many windows as some of the others. This building was once full of businesses, but then a bunch of problems kept happening, some pipes breaking, some electrical issues. They finally got around to renovating the floors, and now there are a handful of businesses on the first few levels." He continued explaining the specifics of the building as we walked inside. "We always go up to the roof to check the cable mounts before we start working for the day. You never know when some idiot is going to mess around with some bolts as a sick joke." We walked through the lobby to a doorway that opened to a set of stairs that were clearly not meant for everyday use. Paint cans littered the steps, and plaster dust covered everything in an even layer. On the second landing was a temporary metal door made from some steel bars. It was bolted into the walls and blocked off the entire staircase. Benjamin pulled out a set of keys from his pocket and unlocked the swinging section of the door. "The construction company put this up to keep the hobos from sneaking through the lobby and bedding down on the upper floors. Between us, I'm not sure it worked. Someone tried to break it down a couple weeks ago." He pointed to a set of dents that bulged out towards us. We started the climb up through almost 70 empty floors before finally reaching the roof. Light gravel patches covered the black roof of the building. A short wall enclosed the space dotted with air units. It all looked normal. I had no idea what this place would come to be in the following days. Benjamin showed me how to unlock the machinery for the hanging platform and pulled the lever to bring it up the side of the building. "Now, when you get on the platform, you'll want to make sure you lock the controls up here. You'll still be able to control everything, but that way you know nobody is going to be messing with you." "How long will it take us to clean all the windows?" I asked. I leaned over the edge and looked at all the glistening glass that stretched out beneath me. "We won't be doing anything. I'm afraid after this quick training session, you're on your own. I have another side of the building to take care of," he said. "You won't be on the platform with me today?" The thought made me nervous. "Nope. The boss is a slave driver. You met him," he said. He ran through all the procedures one last time before setting me off on my own. That first day seemed to take forever to pass. As I cleaned the windows, I felt my hair stand up on my arms. It felt as though someone was peering at me through the dark reflection. The longer I was there, the stronger the feeling became. I shivered as the platform swung slowly beneath me. I guess my instinct knew something was wrong long before I did. At home that night, I was hesitant to share my unease with May. I didn't want her to think I was already complaining about a job after struggling to find one, but she seemed to sense it. "I had a feeling when you left for work today," she said quietly. "Today was a little scary. I had to run the hanging platform by myself, and I felt like I was being watched." I laughed after I said this, trying to take some of the weight off of the words. Maybe we should rethink this. Something doesn't feel right," she said. "No, we need the money. We agreed on this," I answered. "It'll be fine." I kissed her and we got ready for bed, not knowing how wrong I was. At work the next morning, I entered the building by myself and began climbing the stairs, passing through the locked door. I made my way through the checklist on the roof and set to work on the windows. The feeling of being watched slowly crept up as the hours passed. I felt as though the watcher was moving from floor to floor in front of me, following my movements as I cleaned. Around noon, clouds started to cover the city. The air began to condense and a fog formed around the top of the skyscraper. With the wind picking up, I decided to bring the platform back up to the roof and secure it before the storm hit. Pulling the lever, I began climbing to the top of the building. The nearer I came to the roof, the warmer and brighter it seemed to become. A golden glow radiated through the fog, spreading from the horizon of the roof. I finally reached the top and climbed over the wall into the golden light. It was an unnatural glow, as though the fog itself was shining. After I locked the platform into place, I turned and prepared to leave. Before I made it a few yards, a small, furry shape came into view through the fog. As I got closer, I could see it was a cat hunched over, facing away from me. "Hey there, little guy. How'd you get up here?" I walked around to the front of the cat and stepped back in confusion. Across the cat's face, spreading out in a uniform pattern, were little carved out sections of skin. The cat glanced up at me and meowed, stretching its back. I stared in confusion as the cat acted completely normal, as though the lacerations on its face didn't bother it. I took a few steps back. A small giggle came from behind me. I turned to see what could only be described as part man. A tall, thin being was standing before me. Its body was slightly turned away from me, and one arm crossed the front of its body. Sickly white skin stretched over its protruding skeleton. As it finished giggling, its hand fell away from its face, revealing a new collection of horrors. Though it wore a shy expression, its facial features didn't seem possible of expressing emotion. The skin around its mouth was cut away, leading into a uniform pattern, like the one on the cat, which spread across its face. Its nose looked as though it had been burned off long ago, leaving a dark, jagged hole. The most startling thing was its perfect set of teeth. The white, even rows grinned at me as it gave me a quick wave. "Hello," it said, jolting me into movement. I ran towards the stairwell, my heart beating through my stomach. "Wait!" it called. The voice sounded scared, and was the only reason I slowed. I pulled a window cleaning tool from my belt and held it out between us. "I do apologize for frightening you. What is your name?" he said, sheepishly glancing at my face. My mouth opened and closed several times before I decided to answer. Joseph, I said. The only reason I didn't move was because of how bashful and earnest it appeared to be. "What's your name?" "Oh, I haven't had a name in many years. It's a pleasure to meet you, Joseph," it said, following with a small giggle. Out of the corner of my eye, I began to notice other forms in the mist. More animals began to peer through the golden fog, all laced with the same pattern. A snake, a bird, and a rabbit came into view, acting perfectly calm. It was then I realized what the pattern reminded me of. It looked exactly like the doilies I'd seen my grandmother make when I was a child. Each animal, and the man, looked as though someone had placed a doily over their faces and intricately carved out the pattern. "I've seen you notice my friends," it said, bending to pet the rabbit's head. I started backing toward the door again and was about to leave when it said, "I know what you want." I stopped, my hand resting on the door handle. "What?" "You need money, right? Isn't that what is troubling you?" it asked coyly. When I didn't answer, it continued. "I can help you with that, Joseph. You just wait here." It disappeared back into the fog, leaving me with the animals. Several minutes later, I was still standing by myself in the fog, starting to wonder if I had really just had a conversation with the doily-faced man. I wish I had decided to run then, but the temptation of money made me stay. The image of May getting sick from hunger kept flashing through my mind, and gave me the courage to wait for him to return. Finally, he emerged from the cloudy curtain, carrying a mottled form. In his hands was a round shape made from various parts of animals, all stitched together. It had an opening in the top like a bag. "I made this," it said proudly. "It's a purse, and it will help you with all your money problems." "How?" I asked. "Just take it, and you will see, Joseph," it said, eagerly offering it to me. "Take it. Take it." Slowly, I reached out my hand and took the purse, and then turned and ran down the stairs. I nearly fell as I raced down the steps, finally bursting through the temporary door and slamming it behind me. With all the willpower I had, I slowed my pace as I entered the lobby. The normalness of the scene around me seemed surreal. I blinked around at the people reading newspapers and hurrying outside to catch cabs. Joseph! There you are! I wondered what was taking you so long, Benjamin said, walking across the lobby. What do you have there? I looked down, surprised to see the animal skin purse. It's nothing. Something I just found. Look, Benjamin, I need to go home. I'll see you tomorrow, I said, quickly heading for the exit. Okay, thanks for the conversation, he said, calling after me. When I got home, May took one look at my face and jumped up from the couch. Joseph, what is it? Joseph, what's wrong? What happened? She said. Her eyes searched my face with concern before trailing down to the odd shape in my hands. What is that? I leaned against the door and slid down to the floor, struggling to find the words. Finally, I told her everything that had happened, trying to convince myself it had happened as much as her. She furrowed her brow, now sitting on the floor beside me. Are you sure it wasn't your coworkers playing a trick on you? Some sort of initiation? She asked. Yes, I'm sure. You don't understand what it was like. I held up the purse and said, This is what it gave me. It said it would help with my money problem. Joe, this is ridiculous. There wasn't a monster on top of a skyscraper in the middle of a city. She stood up then, crossing her arms. I'm not making this up. I don't know if I should go back, I said. She let out an exasperated sigh. You need to grow up. I don't need this right now. What I need is money for the heating bill, she snapped. Right as she spoke, a rustling sound came from inside the bag. We both looked at the purse. Slowly, I turned it over, and a bundle of cash fell onto the floor. This wasn't in there before. I'm sure of it. I ran here from work, swinging it the whole way. It would have fallen out, or I would have felt it, I said. May picked up the roll of bills and unfolded it. After a moment of inspection, she said, There's enough money here for the heating bill. Exactly enough. Try saying something again, I said. This is ridiculous, she repeated. Just do it. Fine. I said, I need money for the heating bill. I tipped the bag, but nothing fell out. I need money? I said. Again, nothing happened. I need money for rent, May said. The bag rustled again, and I reached in and pulled out a larger bundle of money. It has to be for something we need, she said, excitedly. This is crazy. For the rest of the evening, we ignored logic and let our greed drive us. Through trial and error, we managed to pull enough money out of the bag to pay for all our debts and bills. With each use, the seams of the bag loosened, causing it to finally fall apart by midnight. Now what? May asked. I don't know. I don't think I can go back there. You didn't see him. You don't know what he was like, I said. The thought of his face made my stomach heave. Do you think the doily man has other gifts? She asked. Why? We could go back together. Joe, this could be the answer to everything. Please, she added when she saw the look on my face. I could have said no. I should have, but the way she looked at me told me that she honestly believed this was our way out. In that moment, I believed her. Within 10 minutes, we were walking through the dark city streets to the skyscraper. I used my keycard to get through the front door, and we made it to the metal door in the stairwell. What is it? She asked when I stopped unlocking the door and began inspecting it. Someone tried getting out again. I ran my hand over the fresh bends in the metal frame. I shivered as I imagined what had been desperately trying to break through. May squeezed my hand, and I unlocked the door. Together, we climbed the dark stairs up through the quiet building. When we reached the roof, I signaled her to wait for me inside. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold air. The rooftop was completely normal, as it had been the first time I had seen it. Confused, I thought through everything I had done before I met the Doily Man. An idea came to me, and I climbed into the platform. Unlocking the controls, I descended toward the street. Halfway down the building, I stopped and began climbing again. As I approached the roof, the warm, golden fog returned and grew thicker. It looked as though the dawn had arrived on the roof of the building and left the rest of the city in shadows. This time I paid closer attention to the fog and noticed an oily shimmer to the cloud. It coated my skin in a gummy layer and made me feel sick. The platform locked into position as I stepped back onto the roof. From where I was standing, I could see the Doily Man hunched over something. "Hello?" I said, trying not to sound scared. He stood up and turned, slurping up the last of the animal he was eating. The blood coated the lower section of his face, filling in some of the patterned holes. "You'll have to excuse me," he said, gingerly wiping his face as I stared, horrified. "I thought it was your friend," I said. "It was. Aren't you one of my friends too?" it asked. The question disturbed me, so I ignored it. My wife loved the bag you made," I said, twisting my fingers. Suddenly, the Doily Man's face contorted into one of rage. He grabbed his face with both hands and smeared the blood around in circles as he screeched. "I made that for you," he spat. "No, I know," I said, too scared to move. The words fell out of me in jumbled segments. I didn't care what I was saying. I just wanted this moment to end. I know you made it for me. I liked it so much that I had to show my wife. I was excited to show the gift you gave me." He huffed a few times and then turned away from me, walking over to a small table I hadn't noticed before. There were 4 seats, 2 of which were occupied as the Doily Man approached. I walked to the table, delicately adorned with a tea set, and looked at the 2 forms. One was a rabbit, nodding its doily-patterned face at me as it smelled the air. The other form was the decomposing corpse of a man. The body sat rigid in the seat, its jaw gaping open at an odd angle. It wore a tool belt, similar to the one I had for work. "That's the man who visited me before you. He was ungrateful for his gifts," the Doily Man said curtly. I just nodded, trying not to get sick. "I'm afraid you won't be able to join us. All the seats are taken," he said. Then he leaned over the extra chair and vomited bloody gore across the seat, causing me to empty the contents of my own stomach in the gravel. When I stood up and wiped my mouth, I could see the door to the stairwell was open. May was creeping through the fog, signaling me to keep quiet. My heart dropped in my chest. I looked at the Doily Man to see that he was busy pouring tea for his guests and beginning polite conversation with them. "Edgar, I'm so glad you're feeling better," he said to the rabbit, as May disappeared into the fog behind him. "Was he sick?" I asked, trying not to look anywhere but where she had gone. "Yes, Joseph, now don't interrupt," he shouted, slamming his fist against the table, rattling the plates. He glanced around sheepishly and straightened the napkin on his lap. "I do apologize. I seem to have a short temper tonight." May materialized out of the fog behind him, carrying several objects in her arms. She crept toward the staircase. I could see a small object on top, teetering on the pile. I knew what was going to happen, but there was nothing I could do to stop it. The small object fell off the pile and shattered on the rooftop, echoing through the fog. The Doily Man's face snapped up and swung to look at her. An inhuman screech escaped from his jaws. "Stealing? You're stealing from me?" he screamed. "Run!" I yelled. I started sprinting to the door. Behind me, I heard the tea table crash as it was thrown across the roof. A moment later, I was tackled to the ground as the creature shoved my head into the gravel. "Steal from me?" he hissed in my ear. "I'll grind your bones for my bread." His head lifted for a second before he plunged his teeth into my shoulder. I felt the blood soak my shirt and prepared for him to tear a chunk of my flesh away. A jerk rocked my body, causing the doily man to release his grip. May was cursing as she kicked the pale body on top of me. He pulled away from me and prepared to lunge at her, his body splayed out on 4 spidery limbs. "Stop!" I gasped. He turned to me, tongue licking the blood from his teeth. "All you want to do is get down to the ground, right? That's why you've been trying to break through the door downstairs," I said. I held my hand over the gaping wound in my shoulder as I waited for him to answer. He didn't respond, but I could tell I was right by the disgusted look on his face. "I have the keys to the platform. You can take it all the way down to the ground. Just leave us alone." I pulled the keys from my pocket and threw them at him. Without hesitating, he snatched the keys from the ground and bolted for the platform, still moving on all 4 limbs. He clambered up the wall and onto the lift, then shoved the key into the control and pulled the levers with expert precision. He had been watching me. "Go push the red lever on the cable mount. It'll make the lift fall," I said. It would be my biggest regret. May ran over to the mount and grabbed the lever with one hand and steadied herself on the wall with the other. With a quick jerk, she released the cable. As it slithered through the mount, a bony hand clamped around the arm she was using to hold on to the wall and pulled her over. I only remember screaming in agony after that moment. They tell me I was found lying on the roof the next morning, bleeding out. Only May's body was found on the sidewalk, skewered in the wreckage of the platform. The police would have suspected me if it hadn't been for the teeth marks on my shoulder. Everything else was gone. The animals, the table, and the fog were gone before anyone else could see them. The pieces of the purse were still in our apartment, but I couldn't prove they were anything special. The money had also vanished. No one believes me now. They tell me I should write my story so I can work through the thoughts and see they could never have happened. No matter how many times I write this, I know it's true. I know he's out there, no longer trapped in his own world in the clouds. He can smell me, and he's waiting to grind my bones to bread.